What has been the best move of the NFL free agency? We are here, ESPN Get Up. We're going to see the green list, which is the top 5 list of the best free agent signings. Off the top of my head, I will say it's between two. Now, you can look at it two different ways. You can look at what is the best free agent signing this NFL offseason by value or by impact. Because you may say by impact, Kirk Cousins, right? By impact, Kirk Cousins probably is the best signing, the best deal that was done, because he's going to turn Atlanta immediately into a, maybe not a Super Bowl contender, but definitely a contender for the NFC. Now, if you break it down money-wise, is it really that great? I don't know. You could debate that. If you look at just the money, you could argue Derrick Henry might be the best signing. You're getting Derrick Henry on a very cheap deal, very impactful player, still has a lot of legs left, recently has been one of the best backs in the NFL. Like, he's still at the peak of his powers. You could also argue, and this is controversial yet brave, you could also argue the best free agent move, value-wise, is Russell Wilson. You're getting Russell Wilson for $1 million, basically. You're getting him on a very a very cheap deal, while Denver is paying a majority of his salary. 2 years ago, look at what it took Denver to get Russell Wilson, right? 3 years ago, whenever the deal was. And look what Pittsburgh gets Russell Wilson for now. So he could be on there. Top of my head, I would probably say Derrick Henry is what I think is the most impactful and the best value, just a nice hybrid. Kirk Cousins probably 2, and then we could debate a few others down the road.
Has now come and gone. And I know what you're wondering. You're thinking, Greeny, what were the 5 most important moves that got made this week? Well, I'm glad you asked. Let me start at number 5 by pointing out the bridge quarterbacks. There were 3 teams that made quarterback moves that leave them very much in the market for quarterbacks. They include Minnesota. They include New England, which I think is a fascinating one. Watch those teams still to be looking to make trades, to make acquisitions, and the Raiders as well. Gardner Minshew, those all have.
The bridge quarterback thing, good discussion. This kind of talks about, or this kind of is my point of what I was talking about with Baker Mayfield last week, where why pay Baker Mayfield $30 million a year, $35 million a year, whatever it ends up being, because we know NFL deals are not just the number you originally see. Why not just go get a Joe Flacco for cheap? Joe Flacco, a lot of people were like, oh, Cleveland's not going to move off Joe Flacco. Cleveland just gave him away. Joe Flacco's now he's in Indy, super cheap deal, super effective player last year. You don't think Joe Flacco could do the same thing Baker Mayfield did impact-wise for the Buccaneers? Gardner Minshew, they ended up, I think, paying him a lot. But Gardner Minshew, a guy who's going to go compete, a guy who's available, who's going to at least throw the ball around. Jimmy G, he just got released. Jimmy Garoppolo is just sitting out there. I'm not saying Jimmy Garoppolo is as good as Baker Mayfield. You could argue that. I mean, Jimmy G did go to a Super Bowl. But if you have a $100 million Baker, or you got $5 million Jimmy G, to me, I'm taking those bridge quarterbacks all day unless I have, for certain, my franchise guy.
Have bridges.
Now, the bridge quarterback that I don't think is a great situation is Minnesota. I don't think Sam Darnold, I wouldn't consider him a bridge quarterback. Minnesota's going to have to get a quarterback in the draft. That's no doubt about it.
Might not even give those quarterbacks numbers. Just put bridges on their jerseys, because all 3 of those teams, I think, will be in the quarterback market when we get to the draft. At number 4, I think the Packers signing Josh Jacobs. We just talked about it a minute ago. Josh Jacobs is better.
Yeah, I mean, Josh Jacobs is good. Aaron Jones is good. And that's why I wouldn't put this high up there, which is why if he put Saquon up there on the Eagles, I would push back on that as well. But, I mean, like, what really is the difference between Josh Jacobs and Aaron Jones as far as, like, productivity, as far as impact, as far as all that? You could argue Jacobs is better. I mean, Jacobs led the NFL in rushing, 2 years ago? So he might be better, but is he that much better than what Green Bay had? I don't know about that. I mean, he's good, but
than Aaron Jones at this point. Aaron Jones, who was a great player, a great leader, and a great contributor for that team. They just got younger and better on an offense that was already young and good. I think the Packers do have a chance to have the best offense in the NFC this year, and I think they're a sneaky, excellent Super Bowl pick. At number 3, I love the Ravens signing Derrick.
There we go. See, yeah, I mean, Derrick Henry when I saw the Saquon deal, I was like, man, this is a lot. This is a crazy deal. I don't know about this. Then I saw the Derrick Henry deal, and I'm thinking, what's going on here? Because usually, rising tides lift all ships. Usually you see like a Saquon deal, and then all the other star running backs, which Derrick Henry certainly is, all the star running backs kind of gravitate to that number. Derrick Henry is basically half of what, money-wise, half of what Saquon's getting. And Derrick Henry, I would argue, I don't even think this is an argument, Derrick Henry has been more productive over the last couple of years. The Ravens are getting the better running back. And I'll tell you this, if you think you can stop Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry on some kind of read option, short yardage situation, absolutely no way. No way. I mean, I don't want to say they're going to be unstoppable, but they might just get back there, run like some weird wishbone option type situation, and completely change the NFL. I mean, what Derrick Henry by himself has lifted Tennessee up, has drugged Tennessee to relevance. You add a player like that with Lamar Jackson, who this is exactly what Lamar Jackson wants. Or his style of play wants is a viable running back. Whew, the Ravens are going to be sweet.
Derrick Henry. I'm going to expand on what Dominique Foxworth just said about the pressure that it takes off Lamar Jackson. Do you know who the Ravens' leading rusher was last year?
Lamar Jackson.
It was Lamar Jackson. When your quarterback is your leading rusher, that is a recipe for disaster. They were this close to being a Super Bowl team last year. I get it. But everyone doesn't start where they left off. They start at the beginning. Derrick Henry is an outstanding acquisition. Yeah. So is Saquon Barkley.
And a lot of value.
I put him at number 2.
All right. Now, I'm going to say something controversial yet brave. And I have a whole video on this on the channel coming up. So, I'm not so sure Saquon is an upgrade over DeAndre Swift. I would honestly argue that he's a downgrade from DeAndre Swift because I'm pretty sure DeAndre Swift is younger, and I'm definitely sure DeAndre Swift is healthier and plays more games. So is Saquon good in a vacuum? Yeah, Saquon's sweet. Can we expect Saquon to be healthy for an entire season? No, not really. Is Saquon's productivity that much better than DeAndre Swift? No, it's actually worse. That's not good, right? And compared to Derrick Henry, you vastly overpaid. Vastly overpaid. So you're paying a ton of money for a guy who is going to be hurt all the time for production that you had last year. I don't know. Now you could argue and you could say, well, James, relax. James, come on, pal. James, listen. The Giants have a horrible offensive line. The Eagles have a sweet offensive line. Saquon will be able to run through those holes. No doubt. But he won't be able to run through those holes when he's, in a walking boot or he's got icy hot all over his leg or whatever his injury is this year. If you told me right now Saquon plays every single game of the year, I say, okay, maybe we can talk about this being up there. I think Devin White being signed by the Eagles is a more impactful, better value signing than Saquon. I'll say that. I just don't like it. And then you add into the fact that Jason Kelce's gone now. How's that shake up the offensive line? You add into the fact that the Eagles weren't very good last year. Yeah, they were good, but they took a step backwards. They were at the end. I understand they made the playoffs. I understand they were viable. I understand they, at one point you could argue with the best team in the NFL. But by their standards, they dropped off dramatically. Certainly by the playoffs. Certainly by the end of the season, they were shelled themselves. Jalen Hurts by the end of the season took a complete step backwards. And now, like I said, with Jason Kelce retiring, more heat on Nick Sirianni, and the Eagles are in a weird spot. So I'm not saying this is bad. I'm not saying Saquon hurts the Eagles, but I don't think it's that big of a deal when you compare it to DeAndre Swift. And then if you throw in the money, it's not good.
I've been saying it for weeks. Saquon Barkley is going to have a McCaffrey-esque impact on Philadelphia. Football has never been as easy for him as it's going to be now with all the other weapons around him. Dan Orlovsky said it that way on this show on Monday, and I think he was exactly right. Saquon will have a huge impact in Philly.
He's got to play.
That team will
Bottom
win the
line.
division. But at number 1,
I think, obviously Cousins is number 1, but I think it's interesting. People do this with coaches too. But whenever you're asking a player to do something they do not do, so you're like, the pre-qualifier to this is that Saquon's healthy. The pre-qualifier for this is that Saquon plays every game. he gets a ton of volume. Think about the volume that Christian McCaffrey gets. You're talking about, 10 targets a game, 25 carries a game. Like, he is touching the ball, or he is involved a whole hell of a lot. And he's got to play every game, right? So not only are you asking Saquon to stay healthy, which he never does, you're asking him to all of a sudden get this tremendous amount of volume if he's going to have a Christian McCaffrey type impact. Now, if you say, well, he doesn't have to get that much volume because they have all the other players around them, right? They have, they have tons of weapons, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. And okay, well, then he's not going to have a Christian McCaffrey impact. And if that's the case, better off with DeAndre Swift. That's my whole point, is that people are kind of talking out of both sides of their mouth with the Saquon move, where you're either expecting him to do something he has not done, or you're expecting him to take kind of a different role and be kind of an accoutrement to the Eagles offense. And if that's the case, he's not worth the money. So the way I look at it, either situation, he isn't worth the money. Either situation, you're better off with Derrick Henry. Either situation, you're probably better off with DeAndre Swift.
I'm going to go the Atlanta Falcons signing Kirk Cousins. I know it's obvious because he's a starting quarterback, and that's always the most significant thing. But the reality is that team was Kirk Cousins away from being genuinely excellent. To be as decent as they were, with coaching as bad and...
Now, this is what I would say about Cousins and the Falcons. This reminds me a lot of Jacksonville last year. I put out a ton of videos last offseason saying that I didn't think Jacksonville would be very good because Jacksonville wasn't very good the year before. They just kind of caught fire at the end. They, made a good playoff, or they made a good run at the end of the season, got into the playoffs, all that stuff. People thought Trevor Lawrence was great, blah, blah, blah. And I was saying I think they might go back to the mean. And if you go back to the mean, they're only like a 9-win type team. People skewered me. People were saying they're a Super Bowl pick. People were saying they're an AFC conference, shoe-in for the championship game. They're saying Trevor Lawrence is an elite quarterback, and that's a great example of you're giving me a team that's never been great, that isn't great, and you're expecting them to make an enormous leap to go from good, because the Falcons weren't good last year. So the Falcons would have to go to good, then they would have to go to great, and then they'd have to go to elite for this to work out. Cousins makes them better. I think they're the best team in the NFC South right now, on paper. Best team in the NFC South. I think they could be like a 10-11 win team, something like that. Does that automatically catapult them to the elite level? Does that automatically catapult them to the great level? Or are they just a good team? I think right now they're just a good team. Now, if they get Dallas Turner in the draft, if they address their pass rush issues, if they address some of that kind of stuff, okay, I can hear it. I can hear that. But I do think people get ahead of themselves sometimes. The Texans are very similar, where a lot of people this year are like, oh, the Texans are a Super Bowl team. It's okay. They won the division on the last game of the season by beating the Colts, and the Colts probably should have won that. They dropped the pass on fourth down. Let's give them a little time to be good. Let's give them a little time to be great before we shoot them all the way to the Super Bowl. A lot of the times you see this, and then a team like the Falcons this year could win 10 games, win a bad NFC South, make it to the playoffs, get beaten in the playoffs, and people are going to be like, oh, the Falcons underachieved. But in reality, they overachieved because they haven't been in that spot. So I think Cousins definitely elevates the Falcons. I'm not ready to put them. I'm not ready just because of Kirk Cousins. In 2 weeks, in 3 weeks, if they make a couple more signings, short the defense, draft an edge rusher, we could be changing our tune a little bit, dependent on what some other teams in the NFC do as well. But just to throw them in there, I mean, you could just say, are they better than Minnesota? You could say, is this Falcons team better than the 13-win Minnesota team we saw 2 years ago? And if your answer is no, then why would you think they can do what that team couldn't do? And if your answer is yes, they are better, okay. But I would start there. I would start with, is this Falcons team better than any Vikings team Kirk Cousins has had?
Quarterback play as bad as they had in what was already a very winnable division, I think that Kirk Cousins makes them an 11-win team this year and a legitimate Super Bowl contender in the NFC. The defense already.
I mean, like that's the problem, right? The problem is this huge jump. The problem is the enormous jump to that Super Bowl level. Do I think Kirk Cousins makes them better? Absolutely. Do I think the Falcons will be dangerous? Absolutely. Do I think they're now a Super Bowl team? No. Like, that's a lot. That's a huge leap. Kirk Cousins has never been on a Super Bowl team. Kirk Cousins has never led his team to what Greeny is expecting him to do. That is where I get confused with this, when people are like, okay, you've got a coach who has never done it. You've got an OC who's never been an OC. You've got a quarterback who's never done it. You've got a roster that's never done it. I'm expecting them to do it. That just seems like a weird algorithm.
Isn't as bad as people think, and it's going to get a lot better. They have the 8th pick. Come on in here.
The defense is fine. Like, the defense, I think, was 12th last year. If you look at maybe DVOA, is 12 was definitely top 15. I think it was 12. So you have about the 12th defense. They cannot rush the passer. If they get an edge at 8, if they get Dallas Turner, if they get whoever and shores that up, and he has an impactful rookie season, could be dangerous. The Falcons do have a lot of good things going for them. Top 5 offensive line, playmakers all over the place. How good those playmakers are is still up in the air. That's another thing. You're taking a bunch of guys who have yet to do anything, Kyle Pitts, and people are all of a sudden rolling the clock back and saying, Kyle Pitts has a ton of potential, but does he? Right? Like, you're just erasing the last couple of seasons because of how bad the quarterback play has been, and you're now bringing back the hype that Kyle Pitts had going into his rookie season. I've already heard people saying, and you're going to hear this all off season, you're going to hear Kyle Pitts is the number 3 or number 4 tight end in fantasy football. You'll hear that the whole way. And that's strictly off of hype. It's strictly off of potential, because he has never done it. He has never proven that. So is Kyle Pitts better than TJ Hawkinson? Probably not, right? Probably isn't. Is Drake London better than Justin Jefferson? I would say no. Okay. So you've got Bijan. Yeah, Bijan is sweet, no doubt. But it's just a huge jump to go from they will be really good, they will be in the NFC conversation, to go to that Super Bowl level.
Guys, and have at me. They have the 8th pick in the draft this year, which they can draft a pass rusher like Dallas Turner from Alabama, whoever they want. I think the Falcons are a legitimate Super Bowl contender in the NFC. Bartholomew, why are you shaking your head like that?
I mean, I see a big void on this list. And, I rock with you, Green. We down like 4 flats.
Yes, but there's no defense on it.
Well, I think the move by Houston with Danielle Hunter, being able to get somebody else that can hunt the football, opposite Will Anderson, a team that has.
Yeah, Houston has had a good offseason, for sure. Houston is a team where, similar to Jacksonville, people assume that's kind of a problem with projections, is that everyone always projects all the teams to get better. Not every team can win more games. Some teams just have to lose. Not every single team can develop. Not every single player can develop. Not every single team can, win 2 more games or whatever. I mean, we've seen it every single year. If you go back to Mac Jones' rookie season, you would have never said, oh, in 2 years, he probably won't even be the starter. You would say he'll develop next year, and then he'll develop next year, and then by the following year, he'll be a superstar, and then New England will be able to build around him. That's not how it always works out. So I love C.J. Stroud as much as the next person. But will he be just as good as he was his rookie season? I don't. You cannot bank on that. So I think the Texans had a hell of an offseason. Would I say they're already right now ready to go from complete irrelevancy to win the Super Bowl? Big jump for me.
A lot of salary cap space that has a great defense, great offense. They were one defensive pass rusher away to play with that big lead. I think Danielle Hunter going to Houston should be number 1 on your list.
Fair enough. Graziano?
You got to know your audience. You got no defense on here. You got 2 defensive players on your show today.
That's right.
You got to throw Brian Burns to the Giants on there or something, right? Just to give these guys a little bit. But
I also think the problem is that my audience is not these 2.
Right.
It's everyone else.
Good point.
And all of them are excited about Saquon and
hear about Danielle Hunter.
Yeah.
To your point, I think I got some hipster picks that I like a little bit more too, especially with the Eagles. I love the Barkley addition, but I think Chauncey Gardner-Johnson and getting White at the linebacker.
Yes.
Very nice. Yep. I said that earlier. Said Devin White over Saquon Barkley. Very nice. Is this Dominic Foxworth? Is that who that is? Great call, my friend.
Was the issue last year? The issue wasn't the depth of their running game.
Yeah.
The issue was their linebackers and safeties were having a real hard time tackling and covering people. So those
Shaq Leonard retired and didn't
But
tell
let's go back to my primary argument.
Yeah.
I believe the Atlanta Falcons, with Drake London, who was drafted ahead of Garrett Wilson and no one batted an eye, with Kyle Pitts, who was supposed to revolutionize the tight end position, with Bijan Robinson, who was the best running back prospect in a decade, with a
Who arguably might not be better than Jahmyr Gibbs. Just throwing that out there.
good offensive line and an improving defense. Kirk Cousins, I think that team was Kirk Cousins away from being a Super Bowl contender, and now they have Kirk.
They won 7 games last year. They won 7 games. So if you're sitting here and saying like they were a Kirk Cousins away from the Super Bowl last year, that's a tremendous leap. To go from there, they were a 7-win team in the worst division maybe ever, with the easiest schedule maybe ever, next to the Saints. Well, yeah, next to the Saints. They were a 7-win team in that situation. You think that Kirk Cousins not only is going to elevate them, but then shoot them all the way to the Super Bowl?
Kirk Cousins.
They'll get knocked out in the first round by the Lions. Did you see DJ Reader going there? That's a big move yesterday, and they made the trade for the
You like
corner.
the
which
Lions'
they
weapons better or the Falcons' weapons better?
I like the Lions team mentality, that dog that they got, and they got a bunch of money.
Actually, I like the Lions' weapons better. I do. If you told me I could have Sam Laporta, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Jahmyr Gibbs, or I could have Kyle Pitts, Drake London, and Bijan Robinson, I'm taking the Lions 100%. Like that right there is a perfect snapshot. What is going on with the Home Depot office in the back? Why am I looking at like 3 printers, a stapler, cords all over the place? Is that a fax machine? What is going on in the back here? There's screens all over the place. I mean, that looks like my office work phone over there. Why do they need 4 different printers? Who's printing stuff anymore? The Rogue stapler? A basketball? Where are they? I mean, it looks like a LAN party. It looks like 20 19-year-olds are about to play Halo 2 and eat Papa John's for the next 12 straight hours. The hell am I watching?
Money, DJ Reader, they were a DJ Reader away, and all they have to do is try to get a pass rusher opposite of Hutchinson. I think the Lions really got better. This changes every second. Every second, somebody else is getting.
It's not like Kirk Cousins didn't have anybody around him in Minnesota.
Right.
I mean, like those,
And he had a monster
weapons.
He was putting up monster
and their defense
numbers.
couldn't stop anybody, and I don't know if the Atlanta Falcons defense can stop
I
anybody.
don't know if the Lions defense can stop it.
They got
It is crazy that Greeny is throwing Atlanta over Detroit. That is wild. And I know a lot of people in the comments are probably going to say, well, James, I thought we just had a video where you were saying Kirk Cousins could make them a Super Bowl level team. This is how I look at if you are in the conversation of like a relevant contender. If you are one of the 4 best teams in your conference, I think you are a contender to win the conference. Because the top 2 always doesn't always fall like that. You have to kind of be in the conversation. So do I think the Falcons are potentially one of the 4 best teams in the NFC? I would say, if not, yes, they're right there. They're right on that fringe. They're probably right now, I would say, similar to. I would say they're better than Dallas right now, just as they sit. As Dallas sits, as they sit, I would say they're better than Dallas. Do I think Dallas is a Super Bowl team? No, I said it all last year. No, but Dallas was definitely in the conversation of the 4 best NFC teams. So I think Atlanta is in that conversation. And I thought the Saints were last year too. I thought before last season, I thought the Saints would be in that conversation of top 4 team. I thought the NFC was a legit, and that's kind of the razor's edge you walk a lot of the time, is you can be a legit threat to win the NFC in my eyes, but not a Super Bowl contender. And it's so close, right? Because if you win the NFC, you go to the Super Bowl. So it's hard to, and it is how it falls sometimes, where teams can get, and that is a tier. Like, there's different tiers. It's a tier to be a winning team. It's a tier to be a double-digit winning team. It's a tier to be a playoff team. It's a tier to be a playoff hosting team. It's a tier to be a conference championship team. And then it's a tier to be a Super Bowl team. And then it's a tier to be a Super Bowl winning team. Like that, it's that granular when it comes to NFL teams. It really is. And I think Atlanta is somewhere in the ballpark of like a hosting playoff team and an NFC conference championship appearance team. But there's definitely a gap between them breaking through to, Super Bowl participant and Super Bowl winner.
DJ Reader yesterday. That's a big deal.
The Falcons defense got a lot better last year, and I think they'll continue to do so when they added Jesse Bates. I think the Lions is a good comparison because it's a similar situation where they have a really lot of talented weapons, a good offensive line. The Lions' offensive line is great, but the Falcons' offensive line is good, and a quarterback who we think is not great, but we can trust. I think Kirk Cousins makes them a lot better.
Are they better than the Lions? Are they better than Philadelphia? Are they better than Dallas? Are they better than San Francisco?
Yeah, I would have them better than Dallas. And I almost said better than Philly. I'm down on Philly. I think a lot of people in the know are relatively down on Philly. I would put Atlanta right in that conversation of one of those three teams. Like those are the kind of mystique teams, Philly, Dallas, and Atlanta. I'm confident saying they're better than Dallas. I don't know if I'm there yet with Philly.
This doesn't make
the answer to all those questions is I'm not sure.
You got to get better than Tampa Bay first.
I also think
still chasing them.
But I think that the point to be made is that's who they're chasing. Right. They're not dealing with a young and upcoming Green Bay team. They're not Dallas and Philly fighting it out like crazy in that division. They're not San Francisco dealing with the Rams in that division. They're playing in what I believe will remain the easiest division to win in the NFC, and I think that makes a difference.
Now, this is a betting side of this. Is that if you are betting a team to win the NFC right now, I would tell you to take, like if you're between Green Bay and Atlanta, I would tell you to take Atlanta because Green Bay is not the favorite to win the division. Detroit is the favorite to win the division. So Atlanta is the favorite to win the division. So the way I look at that is that you get a free roll into the playoffs, a free roll into hosting a playoff game. And when you're betting on long shots like that, you just want to be in the dance because then you can kind of hedge out of your money or you can make moves, whatever you're going to do. So I'm advocating to take Atlanta. Last time I checked, they were like 16-1 to win the NFC. I would take Atlanta. That would be my recommendation because I feel good about them winning the NFC South, and I feel good about them compared to even Philly and Dallas. Philly and Dallas are going to be in the dogfight of who's going to win that division, just like last year. So because of that variable, Atlanta, to me, is the better value for way better odds. I bet Philly, I would guess Philly is what? Someone check. I would guess they're like 7-1, 6-1. Probably not even. They're probably like plus 450 or something to win the NFC. I'm just guessing. Somewhere around there. So you could get like quadruple the odds on Atlanta, a team that we would assume is going to be in the playoffs, a team that we're assuming is going to be hosting a playoff game. That's what I would do.
Getting in the playoffs and losing the first round.
Well, we'll see. I mean,
progress.
Tampa Bay didn't lose in the first round last year, and everyone keeps telling me how great Dallas is doing. Yep. They get in the playoffs and lose in the first round all the time, so maybe that's exactly what teams are striving for. Fill in the blank.
There you go. Ladies and gentlemen, good conversation. What do y'all think are the top 5 free agent signings or trades or however you want to do it this NFL offseason? Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it. I will see you in the next video.